I think self-control is such an important topic because our ability to control ourselves leads to success in so many areas of life. It's so common that we get taken off the path that we want to be on. We get distracted by our phone, distracted by other things, or even our emotions. We get emotionally dysregulated and we fall off the path that we want to be on. A good way of looking at self control is through the framework of self regulation. It gives us a few more tools that can be helpful to improve our self control. Self regulation is very popular in parenting, and it asks the question of why? Why are you having a difficult time controlling yourself? It really looks at how stress impacts your ability to control yourselves and dissects the different types of stress in your life that might be limiting you. The following is a conversation with Jennifer Horrocks, who is a registered early childhood educator and a self regulation facilitator. Also on the podcast is my sister Kailey, who has recently become a mother. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I want to start off, Jen. You're a self regulation facilitator. Can you explain to us what self regulation is and how that is different from self control?
So I studied under Dr. Stuart Shanker, who is the founder of what's called the Merit Center. And the process that I studied is called self-reg. So
Mm,
self-regulation, in the scientific terms, is basically having homeostatic balance. So all of our systems are online, and we can adapt to external stressors and recover quickly. So
right.
yeah, it's about being in homeostasis.
Right, and it's related to self-control, I guess, because it kind of looks at the why. Why are we unable to have the self-control? And it turns out that it's because we're dysregulated. Is that a fair thing to say?
So oftentimes self-control and self-regulation are confused. Some people think they mean one and the same.
Right,
Self-control can only happen when we're self-regulated.
right.
So if we look at brain structure, and we'll credit Dr. Dan Siegel for this one,
Okay.
we'll say that these are the outer cortical layers here.
Mm-hmm.
So these are our higher structures of our brain where all of our executive functions lie. Our rational behavior sort of lies within here. And then when we become dysregulated, Dr. Siegel will say you flip your lid.
Mm-hmm.
The amygdala becomes engaged. We'll call this the amygdala. And then we can travel further down the neuroaxis to the brainstem.
Right,
So we look at basically rational, irrational, non rational. So
right.
this a lot of emotion can come from here.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, um, the brain parts are sort of, I guess, interdependent, if you will. So basically, the outer cortical layers, when your amygdala engages, this is really not accessible. Um, so we become highly reactive when we're working off of this.
Right,
So we can't really have self control at this point when we're working off of our amygdala, right?
right. Okay. So like the reasoning part of our brain, the part of our brain that's good at making decisions, it gets affected by our stress and in
Abs-
some way goes offline.
Basically, yeah.
Right,
You
okay.
can pretty much say that.
Okay. Yeah, and I can really relate to that where like a lot of days I'll come home from work and I'm especially exhausted. I've had a really long day. There's been a lot of big events at work. And then I come home and I seem to not be able to control whether I'm like looking at Instagram all day or like I can't I'm way more likely to want to like order Uber Eats and not eat the healthy food in my fridge.
Yep.
And that understanding of okay, well, the stress impacts your ability to reason and make good decisions. That really, really makes sense and connects with me. Kelly, have you had moments like that where you find that the stress seems to be clearly impacting your ability to be in control?
Oh my gosh, yeah, definitely. I relate to when you bring up the food thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, when I am, yeah, just overwhelmed or there's so much going on and hungry, the first thing that goes is like the healthy options or anything that takes any amount of time. It's like, where are the
Yeah,
snacks? I need to get food, which I guess isn't the worst thing because I do need to feed my body. If I'm that hungry, I need to feed my body to get
right.
get that physical need met. But um, yeah, if things are well, and I don't know if it's since being a new parent, but this has just always been, but I've heard this now in parenting as well. The word overstimulation, where, the hood fan on the stove just like will drive someone crazy because that sound is just like, and then everything else, every little sound, or like the baby starts crying and things come up. And I feel like I feel that where suddenly I'm flooded with emotion. And it's like, where is this coming from? Because
Right.
it's not like anything has really changed in me or that something's happened to me, but rather all these outside stimuli have just caused me to feel overwhelmed. And then suddenly I'm not able to have those, rational thoughts of like, okay, next step in cooking dinner is this and this. It's like, what's going on? So yes,
Yeah.
I can relate.
I feel like this concept of self-regulation it's really great because it opens the doors to new solutions to why you're not able to have your self-control. Because if you're not considering regulation as a thing and you're purely just looking at, I seem to not have the willpower, I seem to not have the self-control, it's somewhat of a dead end. Like if you really want to be exercising more and eating better and doing all sorts of things that are going to take willpower, but you're using the model of self-control, you're somewhat limited.
Yeah.
But once you think about it in terms of self-regulation, it opens up some questions like, well, maybe why is it that at this time of day I'm not able to control myself as well? Or yeah, what is it about like the where am I getting stress from? There's multiple areas, and I want to talk to you about that, the domains of stress, and let's go into it now. Might as well. So there's multiple domains. Is that correct?
Well, stress would be defined as anything that sort of steals energy from the brain. And that's what knocks us out of homeostasis. So if we circle back to what you're saying, where you're like, this is going on and this is going on, and so there's a lot of auditory processing happening, there's visual processing happening. So these are all stressors, and stressors can be hidden or overt, right?
Right.
So you become very stress aware, and you become maybe a little bit softer on yourself, and identifying those stressors,
Right.
reducing them.
Right.
Once you reduce those stressors, you become stress aware, and you sort of reflect and say, well, I can sort of mitigate this sort of thing in the future by whatever.
Right.
But then you have to restore. So that's something that we really, really neglect a lot in our society, is the need for restoration. We try and power through so much. You're saying you get home from work and you're trying to will yourself to do whatever.
Yeah.
There's many things that can be restorative, and we all restore in very individualized ways. And that's what I love about self-reg, is that it really meets people where they're at,
Right.
developmentally, and sees how individual you are. It's, you abandon basically a lot of these implicit biases we have. It's culturally relevant.
Yeah, the culture really does, like you said, and it pushes the go, 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 just continue to push. Willpower is something that's really put up on a pedestal, and it's
Yeah.
great. And maybe we can talk about how developing your ability to have willpower is also a good thing. But for the self-regulation model, let's focus on that for a little bit more. I wanted to bring up the marshmallow experiment. Are you guys, you're familiar with that with the children, right? Because
Yeah.
when I read about that marshmallow experiment and how self-regulation applies, that's when things really clicked to me. I was like, of course, when you're more stressed, you're not going to be able to control yourself as well. Jen, do you mind explaining what the marshmallow experiment is?
Well, you really put me on the
I
spot
can
here.
do it if not. It's just,
I think you're probably, you know what? The way that skill acquisition works is the person that's just learned it is the better teacher. So I'm
There you
going to
go.
pass
Pass
it
it
to
back
you
over to
and
me.
tell
I
it
love
to your
that, yeah.
okay.
audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the marshmallow experiment, they did it on children. And so what happens is they bring these kids into a room and they have one marshmallow on the plate. And they say, I'm going to leave the room. And when I come back, I'll give you another marshmallow. But the kids don't know when the adult is going to come back. And this room is a room that they're not really very familiar with. It's kind of like it's somewhat stressful. It's just like blank walls and whatever. And so they have this all on film, and you'll see these kids struggling. They're looking at this marshmallow, and they want to eat it, but they know that if they wait, they'll get another one. So they're having a battle of self-control. They're thinking, I want to eat this. Some kids are like touching it. They're putting a little bit of the marshmallow dust in their mouth. They're really, really getting tempted. And this whole experiment was a test to test these kids' ability to control themselves. And what it turned out is that the kids that were able to control themselves more and wait for the adult to come back and get that second marshmallow ended up scoring much higher on a lot of other tests and ended up being, in general, more successful later on in life. And so it really exposed, wow, even at a young age, we can kind of determine somebody's ability to control themselves. But these self-regulation people, they added something onto that study, and they weren't looking at, oh, that kid didn't wasn't able to control himself, so it's purely self-control. They added the component of stress. So now if you sleep deprive one of these kids, or you really agitate them right before the experiment, their ability to wait for the second marshmallow really declines. Like, because they're stressed, they can't control themselves as much, and they're more likely to just eat the marshmallow right away. So it adds a component of, okay, well, maybe it's not as simple as kid A was better self-controlled than kid B, and he's better self-controlled than kid C. It could have actually been, well, kid A was less stressed than kid B.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
Good
then
for those self-reg,
regulated, yeah.
you know, I don't know, researchers or whoever to look into that, because that's
Yeah.
cool. That's a great another component to that.
Yeah, it really, like, it's a pretty, in some ways simple, but it adds a necessary component, especially if you're trying to help people with their self-control. It adds variables that you can address, like, well, are you getting enough sleep? Are you doing all these things correctly? And then the question there becomes, well, is the kid stressed because he has a stressful household and a general stressful life,
Right.
stressful life, or is he not able to resist eating the marshmallow simply because he has less self-control than the other kid? You know what I mean? It's like, so, but anyway, that experiment hopefully helps to explain it better for people out there. Yeah, what did you guys think when you first like heard of that experiment, and then now that you apply self-reg to the
I
experiment?
was kind of hoping that, you know, that in the end they gave the kids a whole bag of
Oh, yeah.
marshmallows after that just to soothe them.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
that's a stressful experience in its own.
Yeah,
know?
that's true.
The guy who wrote that self-reg book, Stuart Schenker, he described it as, he's like, this is purely a stress test.
Oh, it is.
So yeah, you're putting these kids, they're like 3 and 4 years old, which I maybe should have mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, 3 and 4 years old, and yeah, it's just a stress test.
Who
Pure-
don't have a concept of time, who only
No.
knows what comes next in a routine.
in the immediate
you
future.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I guess we can keep it on kids there for a little bit, and I want to move it over to, this also gives us a new framework for understanding people's behavior. It'll help us understand whether somebody is misbehaving or if they're demonstrating a stress behavior.
Yeah.
Because like we talked about, people's ability to control themselves and make decisions is worse when they're stressed. So now you see somebody acting out and doing something you don't like.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, well, is it maybe because this person didn't rest enough and they're kind of they're burnt out and they're really stressed? Or are they genuinely intentionally trying to misbehave?
Right. And I think just hearing you say that, Ollie, it's interesting when you mention like a kid misbehaving, and then you use the words something I don't like. And I feel like a lot of times with children, what comes up for us where we feel like there needs to be some type of discipline is it's something that goes against the like societal norm that the child's doing, or just something that we don't like. Like maybe you're
overstressed.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe you're trying to cook
Yeah.
dinner and your child really wants your attention, and in your mind you instantly go like, I don't like that, and therefore they're misbehaving. But in reality, they're just trying to have a need met, and they're being a child. And so I feel like, just, nothing wrong with the way you said that, but it just made me think like, in general, I feel like we could use a lot more compassion when we deal with kids, because there is often that like kids are misbehaving and really it's a dysregulated nervous system at the bottom of it all. And so we need to look at it from that lens, opposed to they're being bad and they should know better. But that's not the reality for kids.
So, yeah, misbehavior really only occurs when you're regulated.
Right.
You have the ability to choose at that point, and
Right.
you choose the wrong thing.
That's so
Right.
that's so well said, Jen. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. And then I'd say like 90% of the time kids are not
No, exactly.
are
Right.
not choosing.
It is 90% of the time, it is stress behavior. So it's interesting when we have this newborn, right? We're intrinsically stress detectives. Oh, is the diaper wet? Is he hungry? Is he too cold? Is he this? Is he that? And then, we're co-regulating that way with this infant, and we're reducing the stressors, and we are in essence doing self-reg. But for whatever reason, when the child begins to acquire language, we sort of abandon that,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you
absolutely.
assume
We
you can just
stop
talk
looking
to
for
them.
the stressors, and we assume that this, walking, talking 3-year-old should just know.
Yeah, that's so
Right.
it's so well summarized actually, because that's it. As soon as you can communicate with them, you assume so much expectations suddenly skyrocket for this child, where you go, well, you can speak to me, so therefore you must know.
Right.
Oh,
That's
it's like
wild.
Descartes now.
Yeah, exactly. And the listening, I think a lot of times, like, parents will say, like, why aren't you listening to me? And it's like, well, the child is listening to you. They're just not doing what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's not a they need to listen versus not listen. It's you need to listen to them is what's going on in their world, that they're not
Right.
And
doing
yeah,
what you
so
want.
like with the listening too, when a child's dysregulated and this goes offline and they're functioning off of this and hopefully not going to the brainstem at
Yeah.
that point, if you try to use, like, the teaching moment is never in the moment, okay?
No.
Like, if you try to seek compliance when somebody's in a dysregulated state like that, they can't even process what you're saying
No.
because all of this is offline,
Right. Yeah, it's not just the decision making part of your brain, it's
Yeah.
the ability to learn and even think and understand. So yeah, you're telling this kid who just clearly made a stress behavior thing that you're trying to explain to them, but they just cannot understand it. For one, probably because that part of their brain hasn't developed as much as an adult. But yeah, when they're stressed, it's even more underdeveloped, and then you just can't get it across.
Exactly. Their capacity is so much smaller than an adult's. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, yeah.
It is funny what you're saying though, Kailey, because like yeah, for some reason now that they're somewhat on a level playing field and they're able to walk around and talk, you think, okay, this is like I'll just explain it to you.
Yeah.
But like a year ago they
Never
were.
and never has anyone successfully explained their way out of a child
Yeah.
like doing something.
But a year ago they couldn't speak, and now all of a sudden you're like, okay, they've reached a completely different level, but
Yeah.
not really.
Not really. Yeah. But it was interesting just like with the marshmallow test, thinking about that and thinking about our niece who's 3. She has these gummies, and it's funny because she often will say when she's thinking of, or she has the gummies, she'll say, these are for after lunch. These are for after lunch. We have to wait.
Wow,
and-
she'll do well.
Yeah, I know. I was like, man, that's better than me. Cause like, let's open them right now.
Yeah, you're influencing her.
Yeah. I'm like, are
Yeah.
you sure you don't want to open them? She's like, no,
Yeah.
they're for after lunch.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
she's regulated.
Yeah, there you go. She's
That's good. I wanted to talk about there's domains of stress, which I found really helpful to think about. If you're trying to assess yourself, where am I stressed out? It helps to kind of break it down into different components. So there's going to be the biological realm.
Yeah,
which
that's
will
where
be-
you always look first.
Right. Okay. That's probably the biggest influencer.
Yeah, because the biological domain has a strong nexus with the emotional domain. So once the biological's gone, the emotional's next to go.
Right.
And then, we have social, cognitive, pro-social. And so you can get into a stress cycle,
Right. When you're stressed out in one of the domains, it's
Everything
going to
goes
influence
off
your
the
performance
rails.
and all the other ones.
Everything's
Yeah.
off the rails.
It's crazy how that stuff works because it's kind of sad in a way because it really like spirals people down. Like let's say there's a child that's growing up and their emotional domain's all chaotic. Now it's going to be more difficult for them to be regulated biologically, cognitively, and it's just like things are not. It's like if you have something right, it really boosts you up, and if you have something wrong, it seems to really spiral you down a lot of time. But yeah, that domain stuff really helps because like the biological, that's like sleep,
Yep.
how much you eat, are you exercising enough, are you exercising too much, things like that, biological.
Or smell.
Even smell,
Or
right?
this lighting.
Yeah, this lighting is stressing me
Yeah.
out. Yeah, well, and then the emotional stuff, that would be more like anxiety. Is that like a fair example? Like if you're anxious throughout the day, that's going to be contributing to your stress. Anxiety, maybe depression, any of those things, right? cognitively, I think this one really applies to me
Oh yeah.
at work, where I'll leave work and sometimes I have like a headache just because I've been focusing for like 8 hours trying to read through documents or whatever it is. And then at the end of the day, you ask me questions and I can't answer them as well as I would have been able at like 10 in the morning.
Yeah.
So that one's a big one.
Does your
Yeah.
employer have this kind of lighting, maybe, or
That might be it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
we gotta
fluorescent
sub it
lighting.
out.
8 hours under
They're just
that.
blasting me with
Electrical
that.
drawings.
Yeah.
Ollie, I relate to that as well. And having a baby at home, so much of my energy is going into, what's going on with the baby. And without even being aware of it, I might be doing something that seems like relaxing. Like maybe I'm baking something and the baby's just,
Yeah.
lying or whatever. But in reality, so much energy is going towards, like checking in on them and are they okay?
Mhm.
And then I find my memory is just shot these days where just
Right.
I can't. I'll be like, oh yeah, I have to tell Matt this when he gets home, and then like 4 days later, I'm like, right, I forgot. This is-
Yeah.
we're going to dinner in 5 minutes.
Oh, you're gonna have a house full of Post-it notes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Crazy lady.
definitely relate to that where you just.
Do you think that's like you're getting stressed out in the emotional domain because you're always kind of like worried about your baby,
I think
or do you
just
think it's
you're always
cognitively you're
on.
always like really
Um,
focused and like alert?
Yeah, I think both. I think a
Yeah.
combination of both. So
Mhm.
some stress.
And then biologically, I bet like just probably
How's
not
your
getting as
sleep?
much sleep.
What's
Yeah.
your sleep like?
Well, yeah, that too. Like, thankfully, I can't complain that much. My sleep is not that bad, but of course, I'm being woken up out of deep sleep cycles at some points, and so that's going to affect how I feel the next day. And
Mhm.
yeah. Oh, and in the beginning, I mean, now it's kind of like compounding of months of in the beginning, very aware of making sure she was okay because she was a small newborn baby,
Mhm.
and then now I feel like we've settled into she's very comfortable where she sleeps and all that. But it is, definitely a mix of all of that, biologically, cognitively, and then just the stressors.
And
coming up.
also, if you're nursing,
Yeah.
milk production would be very energy expensive.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So physically, my body is just, taking on a second job, not just
Yeah.
keeping me
Mhm.
alive. I'm providing for
Yeah.
someone else now. So.
Yeah, it's wild how like your day-to-day stress as soon as you have a baby just probably spikes like crazy,
Yeah.
in almost every domain
Yeah. Even
except
when they're like verging on 27, it doesn't.
Oh my
end.
gosh.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It doesn't ever end.
even more stressful maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the sleep one's a big one. I feel like for anybody,
Huge.
and that's probably the one of the easier ones people can influence or like change up.
Yeah.
That will improve the rest of their domains. Sleep, I find, really throws me up. Even today, daylight savings, that one kind of threw me off a little bit. One hour.
Yeah.
Apparently, the rates of like heart attacks
Oh my God.
spike after daylight savings when you lose an
Really?
hour. Yeah, it just
Wow.
shows how impactful
Wow.
sleep is.
Wow.
But yeah, so sleep's one, and then you mentioned social and pro-social. What are those domains all about?
Well, social is basically what it is, our interactions with other people, that sort of thing. Pro-social is sort of our getting to that altruistic behavior, where we're looking at society or our group as a whole, where have I taken too much or have I not given enough, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, yeah, those kind of.
Right. Yeah, social, I could see that as being a really big stressor for some people, and some people not so much. It's almost like that one could be a big stressor if you're
Think of
more
high school.
introverted.
Yeah.
Yeah, in high school for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
But yeah, if you're more introverted, it's maybe more likely to be a big stress. And then if you're extroverted, that social domain maybe is more rarely a drain. But again, I'm personally introverted, so I find social situations can be more of a drain. But I don't know how it feels on the opposite side. And then you mentioned the pro-social. That reminds me of somebody who says, I feel like I have compassion fatigue. Because I'm trying to think of like how, yeah, you're being pro-social, empathetic, caring. That can actually be exhausting in
Oh,
itself.
sure it can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'll hear caretakers like they're thinking, yeah, I'm just so tired. And both of you are in that domain. Do you find that you'll feel pro-socially fatigued?
For sure. I mean,
Mhm.
I have a daughter who will be 23 this year and is nonverbal, has something called Angelman syndrome. She requires around the clock care. She can never be alone. So, yeah, that can be exhausting, especially when for the first 6 years of her life she did not sleep. And I'm
Mm.
not underestimating, like I'm
Right.
not,
That like yeah,
that
Yeah.
was like a
quite
real
literally
thing.
did not
Right.
sleep.
Quite literally did not sleep. And then as a result, these children become seizure prone, you know?
Uh,
So the medical needs. So it's important. The need for restoration is important,
right.
for everybody. Some people have to do more than others, but restoration is huge. And restoration doesn't always mean just sleep. There's
Right.
many, many things that can be
Mm-hmm.
restorative.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very individualized restoration. So we were talking earlier about, you were saying you're a runner, and that's probably restorative for you, right? Because you
Yes.
can get lost, even though you're expending energy. Though you're
Yeah.
still you're restoring through
Mm-hmm.
that process. And so for me, I hula hoop. I'm a hoop dancer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very restorative for me.
Yeah.
But that could be highly distressing for you, Ollie, if I said, "Oh, you're
Oh
gonna
yeah.
hoop to
Big time.
restore."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah,
very
no,
stressful.
and Jen, I appreciate you saying that. I feel like that's so important to acknowledge that restoration does look different for everyone because I've tried the kind of traditional
Sleeping, it just
it's
doesn't work for
just
you.
it just isn't for me. No,
Yeah.
sleeping I love, but the kind of like you need to rest, like go to the spa, those like kind of cliche classic things that people are like, this is what rest is it self-care, take the day. And really, you nailed it when you said that running is restorative for me. I really enjoy it,
Mm-hmm.
and it really makes me feel more like myself and back into that regulated state where I can start fresh. And
It's one of the rare moments when you go for a run where you're not stimulated like by all sorts of things. I find like
mm,
that's why I actually like running without music, and a lot of people think I'm crazy for doing
yeah,
that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go
a
for
little
like
bit.
an hour and a half run with no music, just me out on
Yeah.
the trail.
Yeah.
And yeah, I find it's
And you get
it's
lost
it's
in it.
great
Yeah.
because it's one of the rare moments where I'm just by myself thinking, and the running is just enough of a stimulation so you don't really get too like bored or you don't go crazy. But yeah, running that yeah, there's all sorts of ways that you could restore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kelly, do you find that you would get like almost compassion fatigued as well? Because Jen, yeah, she's taking care of kids and
Yeah.
registered early childhood
Educator.
educator. So
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I know that feeling. I haven't felt it for long periods of time, but certainly acutely in the work that I do. And yeah, definitely feel compassion fatigue and just that burnout sometimes where in particular when I'm not taking care of myself, that's when it comes up and it's like, right, I need that restoration where I can get back to where I can help other people. It's
right,
really like I don't know, in the industry, you can't fill from an empty cup. That's what
Mm-hmm.
people say all the time,
mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I think it's a good one.
Yeah. And the impacts of this stress can be really severe. Like obviously on the surface, nobody wants to be stressed out. Nobody wants to be not able to make uh, as controlled decisions in their life.
Mm.
But what else are we talking about when somebody's excessively stressed? Like biologically, are there like systems that start to shut down? I know you said in the brain, but is there other things?
So that's where we sort of look at the limbic system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And limbic responses, and there's limbic contagion, and there's limbic resonance.
Is limbic like a simplified way of explaining it? Like it's a more primitive system of in the brain that's more associated with emotions. Because I don't really know have
Yeah,
a
it's
good
sort of
grasp on what
it's
limbic is.
well, there's a lot of debate online over what the components of the limbic system are, but that's for another show, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
But basically, if we look at limbic resonance, it's just like any. Are you musical at all? Like no.
I wish.
yeah.
Yikes! Not
The
can't-
opposite.
Yeah.
So
Well,
in
I'm not either.
so
Though.
in music, there's resonance, right? Where if they hit like the D string on the piano, then the D strings will resonate and vibrate on the other instruments, right?
Mm,
And so the limbic systems are the same way, where we have that there's like a channel between us. It's almost like a Bluetooth kind of connection, right?
Okay.
And it does sort of impact attachment as well, you know?
mm,
So there's limbic contagion where, if one person starts to laugh, then everybody starts to laugh or that kind
Right.
of thing. Do you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like that's sort of,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, it's
Um,
like the part of our brain that's more intertwined with other people versus like the what you were describing before, I guess was like the prefrontal cortex, like that's the more evolved or like high level executive part of the
mhm.
brain. That's more rational decision making, not really a connection section of the
So
brain
when we
or
look at play, there's like an exchange, a back and forth almost between the amygdala and the cortex, I'm going to get you. No, you're not. I'm going to get you. No, you're not.
mm,
Mm.
There's that back and forth exchange almost.
hmm,
Um, and it's mobilization without fear, right?
right.
Um,
Yeah, so those certain parts of the brain can be shut down when we're stressed. And I was also reading about it, and it seems like your digestion is a big one that gets shut down, like digestion, even
Mm-hmm.
immune system. So, yeah, obviously, we don't want to be stressed because it feels bad, and we're not able
Yeah.
to do as much as we are capable. But it's actually very damaging at the same time,
Yeah.
which to me is another reason why, like, you want to get this stuff sorted out, and you want to be able to
Mm-hmm.
understand the concepts of regulation so that you don't feel bad, but you also aren't declining in health and running
Yeah.
into serious
yeah, like you
Definitely.
issues.
don't want to kindle your limbic system so that any minor stressor sends you,
Mm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, that
something
can
that
happen.
that you and I feel like, well, that's no big deal.
Right.
But for somebody with a kindled limbic system, those are
Yeah.
the people that sort of snap and lose it like at something very minor.
Mm.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So the
And so
the
then
more
behaviors become entrenched.
so the more stress we get, the more likely we are to get thrown off easily.
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes total
I
sense.
think.
Cause yeah,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say it makes sense because if your ability to control yourself goes down, then as that goes down, you add another stressor. Your ability to resist against that is gonna be
Mm-hmm.
very weak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say. I was thinking of the like fight or flight response, and if you're always living, or yeah, always living in a fight or flight or freeze state, things like your digestive system or other systems in your body aren't getting the attention that they deserve, or your body's kind of like, okay, what's the priority here? It's survival. So number one,
Hmm.
survival. Let's get out of this state. But if as a child you were often in stressful situations where you were in a flight or fight or freeze situation, and you continue to be in that state, yeah, you will end up having, that's where it kind of all becomes like a very holistic approach, or looking at your whole body, where physically you can have issues because of stressors that happened in like early childhood,
Hmm.
because your
mm-hmm.
body wasn't able to get back to that homeostatic state. And
Right.
So we should
Yeah,
do a show on polyvagal theory.
yeah, we could. I'm not familiar
So
with it.
what you're speaking of is the ventral vagus nerve and the dorsal vagus nerve. The
okay.
dorsal is the ancient unmyelinated one, and when that one gets activated uh, due to a stress response to fear,
Mm-hmm.
not feeling safe, yeah, cellular repair stops, all growth stops,
Mm.
digestion stops,
Right.
right?
Wow.
So you don't want to do that too much. You don't want that activated all the time
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
body, right?
Yeah.
seriously.
So that's why
Growth.
being in a state of social engagement is huge because it
Right.
activates that ventral vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah,
There's
the
a
social domain's interesting because, yeah, it can really help relieve your stress, but for some people it can be deeply stressful. I mean, obviously it depends who you're with and what your
mm,
crowd is.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's
that's an example of that, in my favorite book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by
mm-hmm.
Dr.
Yeah,
Bruce
yeah.
Perry. Probably brought
Oh,
it up like 6 times on the podcast, but
Still haven't read it.
you
Me.
still haven't read it.
No, I gotta get around to it.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that
Kaylee's been
needs to
trying to get me to
change.
read that book for like
Like
40 years,
it-
even though I'm only 26. But
um, so in the book, so Dr. Bruce Perry is a child psychiatrist, and he is there's a child that comes into the hospital, and they are not eating and they're not drinking, and they're basically, their body's shutting down physically, and they've run all sorts of tests. Nothing is coming back. There's no sign of anything physically wrong. And I don't know how old the child was, but let's say I don't know, 4
6.
years old. Well, 6. Okay, sure. Let's say 6. And so yeah, and the doctors cannot figure out. So Dr. Bruce Perry gets called in, and they're like, kind of last ditch effort. What do you think? And he looks at the kind of whole situation, and it turns out that the child's home life is just, riddled with trauma. There's there's lots of issues and lots going on at home, and the child's not getting their emotional needs met. They're like mentally really struggling, and after taking a very gentle approach and having one consistent care provider come into the hospital and really make a connection and a relationship with this child, the child instantly starts to thrive, starts eating,
Amazing.
starts drinking, growing. Like, all of the issues physically just disappear
Wow.
because of the love and connection that this child was able to have with this consistent, safe caregiver.
And so they developed an attachment.
Yeah.
And so attachment's not always going to be with the parent,
Yeah.
Right.
as much as it should be. Secure attachment can happen with any adult that's going to give somebody a safe and predictable environment and a lot of serve and return interactions.
Yeah. And maybe we should
Yeah.
talk. Do you want to talk about attachment now?
Yeah, well, attachment I definitely do want to talk about, because that is it is crazy, like you're saying, that these things from childhood can still affect the adults 40 years later. Why don't we go through kind of from child to adult, like what the development is like? Because I know earlier we were talking about, while children seem to have an especially high need to be regulated, because you can't really communicate to them like you would an adult. You can't just explain, I don't like that you did that, and all that stuff. It won't necessarily get through. So when a child is born, the systems in their brain are not nearly what an adult brain is like. Jen, do you want to explain kind of like what how do we get from like a child brain to a teenage brain, and what that means for how we should nurture this child? Because it's at those 3 different stages, I feel like the way you develop and nurture a person is going to be different. And child is obviously the most intense requirements.
Well, it's crucial, right? The
Yeah.
first 4 years are crucial.
Right.
And so it takes the higher order brain, right, to, co-regulate with the child, in hopes that, if it happens enough, if there's enough co-regulation, the child's going to learn how to do it on their own, and what it takes the child to get back to calm and to recover from stress. And so we're not trying to say that we've got to, make sure there's no stress in anybody's lives, because you can take a negative stressor and actually turn it into a positive stressor. And, if we have enough exposure to stress and opportunity to recover from stressors, that's what develops the resiliency that we're after, right?
Right.
So yeah, like with young children, when they become dysregulated, we go straight to soothe, we're not going to say, oh, just let them cry it out.
Right.
Because if you want to kindle that limbic system, that's a good way to do it, is to let the kid cry it out. So we go to soothe. So basically in self-reg, you reframe. Reframing is your first step, if you will, where you're able to pause yourself. You pause so that you tame your own limbic alarm because of that contagion. Because otherwise it's just going to be an endless limbic ping pong match, right? So you pause, you reframe, you basically recognize that this is stress based, right? So then you become the stress detective. You're looking for that stressor. Then you're going to reduce that stressor. Again, you're going to reflect. How are we gonna avoid this in the future? What can we do?
Right.
And then restore, that need for restoration. That's huge.
Right.
And so, with enough consistency and repetition with that routine, then children will be able to do that for themselves.
Right.
In the teens, I hate you
Yeah.
is I need you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
No, exactly.
And again, it's all on how you approach it. If, I have a young one that's turning 13 in May, and it's all about the delivery, it's not about seeking compliance. It's about, okay, I'm here,
Right.
Mhm.
you know?
Huh.
Yeah, I've heard it like connection before correction. So like if you
Absolutely.
can,
That's
number
Dr.
one,
Jean Clinton.
right? Yeah, and if always focus on connecting. So have I connected? And kids are like, I feel like so hyper aware of if you're genuine or not. Like they can pick up on if you're just trying to move this along and fix a situation. Like if they're doing something that and you're trying to get out the door and they're
Yeah.
acting out or they don't want to get their boots on or whatever.
Won't transition.
Yeah, it won't transition. Exactly. They pick up right away if you're being genuine and actually are connecting and empathizing with them and showing them compassion. Like, right, you don't really want to go to the doctors. We have to go to the doctors. We're going to be leaving shortly.
Mm-hmm.
I'll help you get your boots on, or would you like to do it on your own? And you're not making a point of just focusing on the behavior. Like you're not getting your boots on, so like no cookies for you today.
Right.
I'm here for you, and this is a hard thing, and like I don't always get to an appointment on time, and you're 5 years old. Like how do this is
Yeah.
all so new to you.
You don't even know what an
A
appointment is.
Yeah, exactly. A schedule, like
Yeah,
so.
it's kind of metacognitive.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the connecting before you correct, I feel like for me has been a nice like quick way to just get into that mindset. All the things that you're summarizing,
Totally.
Jen, of just okay, how am I connecting first before I'm trying to
Right. So
like
you.
teach anything?
Think back to school, okay? And think of the courses that you probably excelled in.
Mhm.
It was probably the ones that you were most connected with the
Mhm.
educator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, like gym class probably. That'd be it for me.
Actually, you know who I was thinking of the other day was Mr. Orzel, the backwoods skier.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I never had him as a teacher.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't, eh? Did you?
No.
have
Yeah,
him?
yeah, I did.
So he skied the backwoods, that guy. He had
Yeah.
like sponsors too, I think.
Right. Well, he
Yeah.
would take people camping in the woods and all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff like
No,
that.
he was like, really outdoorsy, and I feel like he commuted to work on skis. He
Yeah.
went to work in the winter.
Yeah.
I swear he'd bike in
Probably.
the summer and ski in the
Ski in the
winter when he
winter.
could. When he could, I don't know. Yeah, because I don't know exactly how he'd do that.
Yeah,
But
Did you have
that's
Mr.
dedication.
Bondi too?
yeah,
Yeah, Mr. Bondi was another great one that connected with everybody.
yeah.
And even though he looked like he was 13 years old.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he'd be a savage at times. Like though, well, he would connect, but he'd also be like pretty ruthless. Which connects with some kids. They kind of like the
I
back
guess
and
it-
forth like
and it-
bickering.
yeah.
But
Not every teacher is gonna like they're not every communication style with every teacher is gonna line up with every kid's kind of
Yeah.
learning style. But
that's for sure.
yeah,
But-
but you're right, Jen. It's true, and like we were talking about before, like learning, and then also being in a comfortable, peaceful environment. Like you can't learn if you're out of sorts, right?
Yeah.
And you were
Yeah.
talking about anxiety, and I just think of anxiety and performance and how those go together. And you just if you're in a high stress state, you're not going to be
Yeah.
taking on information and learning new things or wanting to cooperate either. It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it
If
really
you're not
helps to have
connected,
somebody there that is acting as your, like you described, the higher order brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that requirement, it's insanely high when the child's very young, and it gradually decreases. Hopefully that like
Until they know everything.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, and I guess that's because the child, I've heard that their brain is just developing at an insanely fast pace.
Oh, yeah.
Up until about the age of 6,
Yeah.
where they've developed their brain about 95%. And like you said, those first 4 years are super critical because, yeah, if they're developing 95% of their
Oh.
brain in those 4 years, everything you throw at them, they're going to pick it up and it'll actually stick, which is a pretty crazy thing that these things that they picked up when they're 4 years old might stay around until when they're 60
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
whatever
if
it
they
is.
bypass that pruning stage of brain development.
Right.
So they're overwired, right? And then they go through a pruning stage where, these synaptic connections that aren't really required from the overwiring get pruned, and
Mhm.
then things get sort of streamlined from there.
yeah. I just saw yesterday. I I just thought it was so nicely written out, about parenting and parenting strategies. And it basically said, is it a successful parenting strategy if it is doing damage to a child's long-term mental health? And I just like the way that was put, because sometimes people choose parenting strategies that in the moment work and you go, yes, this was successful. And parents sometimes really use their power to get their child to cooperate. And, always parents, the more powerful, bigger person, like you can physically always get your child to cooperate. But if that's having any type of long-term mental health damage, then it's not successful, right? That's
Right.
because
Yeah, it's a simple way to look at it is like, yeah, would this lead to problems down the line?
yeah.
And what you described about the force, like trying to just basically force your child to do things that you want. I feel like going back to that misbehavior versus stress behavior dynamic really helps to know when you should be actually using the force and the like adult capabilities that you have. So is it fair? Like, I don't have kids, you guys do, but like if the child's intentionally misbehaving, they're regulated, they're not stressfully behaving, they're actually just misbehaving. Is that a moment where it is reasonable to be like,
To consequence the behavior?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's consequences to misbehavior.
Yeah.
Right.
And natural consequences, I think, are important because I think sometimes, and Ollie, I'm glad you brought this up, because I think sometimes when looking at parenting and you hear that you're, not doing the very punitive, punishment driven methods in parenting, people think it's like permissive parenting where you just let anything go.
Right.
And that's definitely not the case. And you're trying to, again, in a parenting style where you are responding to the child's dysregulated nervous system, or really what's going on developmentally, and having realistic developmental expectations for them, you also want to be fostering a brain that is going to be mentally very healthy and able to flourish as an adult. And so you want to have natural consequences, because the world isn't going to give a child or a person whatever they want whenever they want. So consequences are important. And I think firm, confident leadership is also very important in parenting. So you don't want to just be like, oh, whatever you want, or you're not ready to go to the doctor's appointment. Like, okay.
The child will start to realize that, like, I can be the boss here.
Yeah. And I think kids they actually want to know that you're in control. They want to know that you know what you're doing. And they will become dysregulated and out of sorts if they're like, look at their parent and go, you don't know what you're doing, or you're flip-flopping back and forth about what's going on. They want someone who, it's like, I'm in control, I'm taking care of you, you're safe. These are the expectations for you at this age. And they're realistic expectations. I think that's another thing. People often have unrealistic expectations of kids, like we were talking about. As soon as they start walking and talking, you go, oh, you're basically 18. You should be able to do everything.
Yeah.
You can sign a lease.
Yeah, you have to have everything in order. And based on what you were describing, Jen, it seems like you yourself need to be really regulated if you want to be properly
You do, because it boils down to that limbic resonance.
Right. Like, you described like a limbic ping pong match, which kind of sounds fun on the surface.
Yeah.
It sounds like a good time.
Beer pong.
Sign me up. But
Limbic beer pong, that could be fun. Between you and your 4-year-old.
What a neurotoxin.
Yeah. But so that's basically, what is that limbic ping pong match? That'd be like if you're having a screaming match with your child.
Yeah, it just never ends.
Because that could be.
That's co-escalation.
Right. Like, that's another reason why it's probably really good to understand, is this child actually misbehaving? Because if they're doing a stress behavior and then you start to control and yell at them, that's another stress.
And then you
they
just
fire
send
back.
them further down that neuroaxis, right? So when you get to the brainstem, that's where there's little to no chance of recovery. Right?
Right. Yeah. So it's just a back and forth. Like, you escalated their stress, and then they escalate your stress, and they're firing back tricky shots, spins.
We should do a polyvagal one sometime, because when we talk about prosody in your tone of voice, where it was motherese is what we called it. It's very soothing. That's why we speak to young children in a very melodic manner, because it cues safety.
Right.
Whereas if we speak in a low tone, that doesn't cue safety for anybody, right?
No.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I always wonder about that too, because you see parents doing that all the time, and I think I talked to you about this before, but is there a balance between not trying to, you're trying to develop their ability to communicate, and so you're providing them, you are an example of here's how you speak, but if you're purposely talking like a baby, is it possible that they'll get limited?
Well,
But
I don't know if you're
well, you know,
talking like a baby.
No.
You're playing.
Right.
You're playing around with prosody. It's the melodic kind of tone that you're taking.
Yeah.
right,
You're not speaking to the kid constantly in third person. Like
Yeah.
you
right,
know.
right.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. And actually, another parenting or author that I really like is Janet Lansbury, and she talks a lot about communicating with your children and communicating in a respectful way. And yeah, you're maybe using a softer tone, but also using like language like I am going to do this opposed to like mommy is going to do
Yeah.
this, and making it known that like we are two separate people and I am explaining. Or like she gives an example that when you say like we don't hit the dog, you know, your child might go like, well, I do. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and then so to say like I can't let you hit the dog. So you're not
Right.
you're not doing this blanket statement like we don't hit the dog. It's like, well, today I am
Yeah.
going to like.
Yeah.
So I think communication is so important. Sorry, I feel like I'm going off on a tangent a little bit here with this, but I think bringing it back to co-regulation and self-regulation being so important in adulthood, because you cannot communicate the way that you want to with your children if you're not regulated yourself.
Mhm.
Like
Right.
I think about when I'm stressed, and maybe all you picked up on it. If I feel stressed, you might see my voice goes up. I'm talking faster. I'm, maybe, talking in circles or whatever. But when I'm regulated, I can be speaking, especially
Yeah.
to a child who needs that clear communication. You
Mhm.
maybe don't
Yeah.
need it from me as much. You can read between the lines and go, okay, this is what Kailey's trying to say.
Right.
But
But
when
that's
I'm-
where the child starts to be able to read between lines, right? That's where they develop the mind reading ability, where they can see,
Right.
oh, that smile means this,
Right.
that tone of voice means
Right.
this. Because when they're born, they have no idea,
Mhm,
but then they
mhm.
pick up on. It seems like there's layers of communication, and it's
Mhm.
not the top layer, let's say, that is of what you're saying. It's more
Mhm.
about like the tone and the energy and the emotion.
What the
Yes.
striated facial muscles are doing.
Right.
So when the
Right.
striated facial muscles are engaged, we know that people are in a state of social engagement, right? So you can try and fake it. You can try and put a smile on your face, but if those striated facial muscles aren't engaged, you sense it. You have a visceral response
Yeah.
to somebody.
And I do feel like kids
know?
are,
And they
They
know.
know.
They
Right.
know.
They know. You're not fooling them when you're just like, I'm gonna smile and I'm not happy with what you do.
Or-
Like, you
Yeah.
need to. And I also think it's okay with kids to say, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I'm gonna leave the room. and
Mommy's going to
a
take
minute."
5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I think it's important to model that I'm not always happy.
Mommy's going to restore,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know?
So I think that's important. Just talking about, you're talking about misbehavior versus, like what's coming from a stress response. And I really do think every behavior from a child has an underlying meaning behind it. And misbehavior can be seen as there's an unmet need. So also looking at it as like maybe there's a dysregulation there. And then also what is the unmet need? So you might sometimes, like I think of
Right.
it tying back into having realistic expectations with kids. And let's say you take your child to a family dinner and then they're at the table throwing their food, or they're doing something that you're just like, I'm so embarrassed right now. And you start to feel dysregulated and then think, right, they're at this dinner with a bunch of adults for going on hour 3. And this is so out of their norm. And, or maybe you're on family vacation, or you've had your in-laws visiting for a week, and then your child's misbehaving at the end of that. And you go, what is wrong with them? Like we have visitors coming. And then you go, oh, what is going on here? Unmet need, probably less one-on-one time with me. This is far beyond what they're capable. Like if you were saying you're introverted, I'm introverted as well. If I can handle 3 hours at a dinner constantly talking,
That's
your child can
very
handle like
energy expensive.
30 minutes of
Yeah.
that, like
Right.
that's
Exactly.
so just having that realistic expectations. And
Remember
what
the
is
kids table? Did you guys have
Oh,
the
yeah.
kids table?
Yeah,
I think we still do actually.
Yeah. We're like 26.
We've
and-
never graduated to the
Yeah, no,
I love the
just not
kids'
enough
table.
space.
It's a fun one. It's a fun one. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do if that child is acting like that, and okay, obviously this is stressful? Do you just say we got to bounce, we got to get out of this dinner,
We got to
or
bounce,
yeah,
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
sometimes
Well, I think that, you got to go prepared. Go with
Yeah.
a bag of tricks for your kid with some quiet activities that'll keep them
Right.
engaged, because to think
that
that
car
children
mat.
should be seen and not heard, I mean, like, that's pretty archaic.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And I think sometimes you do have to leave. I think you have to adjust your own expectations too. So maybe you're really looking forward to this dinner, and acknowledging that, okay, I'd love to stay well into the evening and have, a couple of drinks after dinner with the family or whatever, and then also acknowledge that, well, I have kids now, and so what is realistic for me? Maybe if I really want to talk to my cousin and so, I'll set up a lunch another time where I can do that without kids, because I think sometimes you project what you want your kids to be able to behave and be at some family dinner, and you to have all those nice social interactions. But I think realistically you have to have lower expectations. Go, okay, my child is not capable of being at a family dinner for X number of hours, so we will be leaving early, but I can satisfy my need to connect with my family in a different way at a different time.
Right. Yeah, it's such a massive life shift.
I
Like,
think
your
my
stress is
favorite
gonna increase.
episode of your show was your nanny and granddad.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
I loved hearing about the Lewis family history. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Such a big family now. I don't even know how many grandkids they have. It's growing like
They
every
have
month. it
21
seems, but-
grandkids and then
Really?
20 great grandkids, I
20
believe.
Yeah.
great grandkids.
Yeah.
Wow.
If any of our families
So
listening,
yeah, what's
or
the
if I got
family?
those
What's
numbers.
the kids' table like? It's a whole separate room now.
Whole
Yeah,
separate
basically.
house now. Yeah. There's
Whose
just-
house is that at?
Yeah, actually, I guess with COVID, we haven't done too many big families.
Brennan can host.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you
Shout out
go.
to Brennan.
So
He just bought a place, didn't he?
yeah, we won't get.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think, our nanny and granddad are a lot of fun, and a lot of fun to talk to. Really nice to hear them reminisce about different things, and including the kids in different things. And I think that's also a nice way to do things. If you can include kids and be flexible with how you're doing things. So, actually in our family, our dinners, I think, have gotten earlier, where they're maybe more like late lunches.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You start at
Something
4
like that, where
o'clock,
you can adapt to, young kids aren't able to stay out late, or
No.
they have bedtimes and their routines that they are used to, and so you want to respect that.
Yeah. Yeah, and nanny and granddad, that reminds me of how different people will be able to regulate themselves. Like, Kailey, you go running, Jen, you might hula hoop. Nanny and granddad, prayer, I'm sure, was a big
Right.
regulator for them.
Prayer and
I
gin,
think
maybe.
so. Well, yeah, gin is one of the best regulators known
But
to
then,
man.
you got to be careful with the gin, then becomes maladaptive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
just kidding on that one.
Yeah.
But-
Ollie, what's yours? What would you say?
Mine is the good old fashioned sleep. I find is the best one.
Okay.
But I like running. I'll often do what they call non-sleep deep rest, or yoga nidra is the more like old fashioned term. But basically, like, you just kind of lay down, and it's like a body scan.
Okay.
So you stop thinking, and you just kind of feel your body. So it shuts down that part of the brain that might be overly exhausted,
Okay.
and it focuses more on just feeling yourself. So
So like a grounding exercise.
yeah, exactly.
How long
Okay.
do you do that for?
Sometimes as little as like 10 minutes. I've done
Okay.
longer ones, but yeah, those are nice. But I find nothing beats just sleep. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like
I
the
like sleep.
deepest rest.
If someone doesn't know what is restoring for them, what are some ways that they can find out? Like, I know there's kind of like intuitively, like for me, I know what works, but sometimes, like, maybe that's taken me a little while to figure out that, like, running really does restore me, and I need to make that a priority. But if someone doesn't know what is restoring to them, if they're always feeling dysregulated and kind of in a chaotic state,
Yeah.
what would be the first step to go, what is kind of innate to me to restore my body?
I feel like you need to work on the practices that develop your self-awareness, so that you can
Okay.
tell, oh, that dinner actually stressed me out. Because some people might leave and feel like garbage, but they don't know exactly why.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And some people might go for a run and they feel better, but they don't know why. But so it's like developing that self-awareness will be able to help you determine what are my stressors, and also what are my energy boosters.
So yeah, so we can look at the Thayer matrix as well for that sort of thing.
Mm.
And so understanding that energy and tension determine mood, right? So
okay.
I think we discussed this in one of our little
Yeah,
preambles.
the Thayer
and
matrix is essentially like a graph, right? Or
it's
like a
the
chart.
grid,
Yeah,
that
okay.
grid. And so it's something that we tend to flow through. We can be we can start off in a state of high energy and low tension. So the upper left quadrant of that grid.
Right.
And that's where we're sort of in a state of social engagement. We're at the wine and cheese party. We're mingling. We're having a great time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're primed for our flow state, where we're doing like our deep learning or very high cognitive kind of tasks, where
Right.
we're in a state of high energy, high tension, right? But you can't sustain that forever. And unfortunately, we try to, you know, but it's unrealistic. So then we drop down to what's called a state of low energy, high tension.
Uh-oh.
That's an awful place to be.
Yeah.
It's really, you know, to move over to the low energy, low tension, which is our resting state or sleep even, we got to release that tension first.
Right.
Because you can fall asleep in a high tension state and a low energy state, but your sleep's not going to be restorative whatsoever. You're going to wake up tired.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, Thayer matrix. Google that one and look at that, and you'll sort of go, wow, okay, I kind of know when I should be doing things. Am I going to like review an 800-page contract when I'm in a state of low energy, high tension? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right. I think coming to terms that you're going to cycle through that is a good thing too. Because people, I think a lot of the reason why they'll try to stay in that high energy, high tension is because that's where they are the most productive.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want to stay here. But it's like, you got to come to terms that you're going to have to cycle through. And sometimes you're not going to be as like alert and like on the ball type of thing.
Yeah, that's something I'm still working on. I feel like productivity, I will time my self-worth and productivity closely to each other. And actually, I feel like I used to say different, but recently I've discovered that I definitely put too much emphasis on productivity in a day and less on the restorative thing. You know, I'll cut the run before I'll cut getting things done and doing things.
Right.
And that really isn't going to benefit me in the long run.
Yeah.
Then you don't want to be buried the next day either.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And the demands today, I mean, at any time maybe, but maybe more so in today's society, they keep like increasing, especially for parents. There's just so many things that you need to get done in the day that, usually if you're going to cut anything out, I'm going to cut out the rest or the recovery.
Oh,
period.
definitely. Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the child stage of development, because I know there's an interesting term that can really help people understand the connection between the parent and the child, which is the interbrain connection.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain that to people, Jen?
Yeah, that's like a Bluetooth connection between the caregiver and child, if you will, where you're connected with each other. You can almost read each other without speaking, if you will.
Right.
You know, and it's also part of the whole attachment process to secure attachment.
Right.
And so that's where we sort of get into the circle of attachment and how it is where you're the secure base. The child, when they're really little, you're always within eye shot. They know how to get to you quickly, you know? Like I think of my firstborn, and, you know, he would go off and he would explore safely, but he always knew where to find me, you know?
Yeah, shout
when
out
the
to
chips
Nikki.
were down, he was mom's boy.
Yeah, he's good
And
with
then the
directions.
circle, like I was telling you, the circle of attachment, it gets bigger, right? So then you're like, you know, he's in BC on a ski lift, and you get this message on your phone with a picture of like, whoa. And he's like, Mom, I don't think I can do this. And I'm like, you're on the lift, dude. You have to. You have no choice. You can do it. You can do it.
Yeah, he ended up doing it. I was on that ski trip with him. That double black, he went down.
Jeez. Was it a double black?
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Nikki
For
can
him.
dangle
I
on
didn't
the
even know
slopes.
that was such a term.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm sweating just thinking about that. That
Yeah.
stuff does not excite me.
Nikki loves
So,
his
talking about
adrenaline,
getting
that's for sure.
dysregulated.
Yeah.
I don't put me on a double black diamond. That'll get me going.
But yeah, it's interesting how it does the inner brain connection. I read that it's there for decades, actually. Like this connection between the parent and the child doesn't really disappear. So yeah, when Nick was lost in the house or whatever, that connection's there. But when he's skiing, that connection's still there.
Oh,
20
absolutely.
years later.
Wow, interesting.
And as a child gradually develops, um, I found there's a really, really interesting component to the teenage phase that's unlike any other animal or mammal, where the human development kind of it goes up linear, like gradually, and then all of a sudden there's another spike in growth in the brain and the body. But most other animals, it's just gradual. You just kind of ease your way into an adult phase. And also, unlike most other animals, the human child is extremely dependent on their parent for so long.
Yes.
But the way they describe the teenage phase in this self-regulation book is it's kind of a all of a sudden a turbulent growth period that leads the child from being dependent to now they're on the path of independence, because they can't stay like how they are in the child phase, just being dependent on their parent forever. They need something to snap them out of it. And because the human development period is so long, you end up having these stages unlike other animals. So you get to the teenage phase around 12, 13 or whatever, and now all of a sudden your brain is shuffling around again, and it has the opportunity to rewire. It prunes some of the previously learned things. There's an intense increase in estrogen and testosterone and all these things. And so yeah, that's fascinating, because it's like it's a trigger point for, okay, you're not as dependent on the parent anymore. You need to kind of move away and go out into your community, and you're going to be maybe more influenced with your peers. Yeah, is that like an accurate thing that you've even witnessed, Jen? Like with your kids that
Oh,
have grown
yeah.
up, is like
Yeah.
they now have, all of a sudden it's like they don't want to have as much to do with me, and it's a
Except for in the form of short-term loans, maybe.
Oh yeah. That increases. Yeah.
So,
More loans.
Yeah, no, it's even when they're really little, when they're showing independence, when they're really little, you gotta foster that. You gotta say yes. You know, like if they wanna, like if you're getting them ready, and they say no, I can do it. Hands off, man.
Yeah.
Because the ultimate goal is autonomy. That's where
Right.
we're trying to head,
Yeah.
is to autonomy.
Yeah, it can be so hard. I know this will be something that comes up for me because I like to, do things quickly. And again, that productivity part of me comes into play. But I really like that idea of allowing kids to do things, even if it takes longer, and even if it's messier, and even if it makes more work for you. But that really
Just start
is
the process
so
earlier.
important.
You're out
Yes.
getting ready for work and out the door.
That's
You're
it.
gonna have to
Yeah.
like maybe have a different time zone.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
And like if your child wants to help with dinner and you know that it's like this is, there's very like that you're not actually going to be helping with dinner, but if there's things that you can allow them to do.
Oh yeah.
And maybe on the side you've already got dinner, meal prepped somewhere, but it's like, sure, you want to help
Has
with
my
dinner?
son
Here,
ever
let's-
cooked for you?
Yeah, he's actually a great
He's
chef.
a fantastic cook.
Amazing.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I remember he was like 2 years old in the kitchen.
Oh,
I was
really?
upstairs in the shower. His dad was watching him, and all I could hear was his dad say, "Quick, you gotta get down here. He's trying to make banana muffins." And I can't get him to stop.
Yeah.
So I had him in the kitchen early,
Yeah.
I love that. See, yeah, that things like that I think are so nice, and I'm sure if Nick were here, he would have really fond memories
He'd
of
be feeding us.
cooking.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. Okay, well, why didn't we invite
He'd be
Nick?
doing some kind of flambe in that kitchen there.
Yeah, we should have got him here. Yeah, that'd be nice pasta here, right, for us to eat.
That's it.
Perfect.
Nicky.
But for the teenage years, statistics because of COVID have really done a number on the teens, and
Like
even
mental
on
health
like
and stuff?
like that 1 in 3 teens has some kind of mental health issue,
Wow.
and
1 in
that
3.
50% of teens are in a state of homeostatic imbalance.
Wow.
So when you deny the social engagement system or oppress it altogether, there's a lot of negative consequences.
Yeah, I feel like at that teenage stage, you're likely to have an increase in the biological stresses, because you need more sleep
Hormones.
now. Yeah, your hormones have all gotten all shaken up. You need more sleep now, but you still have to wake up early for school.
I know. I feel like
And
school
then-
should start at 10 a.m. in high school or something. Like
Yeah.
kids need to have more sleep.
And then
And I
there's so
remember
many
how
kids
you
that
used
can't
to
get off
eat
phones.
when you were a teen.
Me personally?
Yeah, I remember you coming over with Nick, and I was like, this guy's got a hollow leg, man.
Yeah.
Like, he could eat.
Yeah. Well, I could still eat pretty well.
Yeah, actually, now when I take Ollie out for dinner, I have to say this dinner is good for one meal because otherwise he'll order 2 dinners. And
Yeah. Well, yeah. For my birthday, she like I like to kind of do things rather than get gifts. So Kailey gave me the hey, I'll take you out for dinner one night.
Okay.
But there was like a little asterisk at the bottom of the card with like the small font. It says, "By the way, this is only good for one meal." Because otherwise, if it's like, "I'll take you out," order like
order for dinner.
Yeah.
Ollie eats 2 dinners, so we're
yeah. But yeah, no, I still eat pretty good. So that never actually really
And
changed
thank
too
you
much.
for that breakfast in the green room, by the way. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
like,
it's a classic of the Ollie Lewis podcast. Every
I
guest
think your other
gets
guests
breakfast.
might be feeling a little ripped off right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, eggs Benedict with smoked salmon. That's yeah, that's what you'll get if you come on the show. So
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that teenage phase, I guess that's where you still have that inner brain connection, and the teenagers haven't developed their ability to make decisions and be in control as much as they used to be, or sorry, as much as they eventually will be. Like I've heard that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't fully develop till you're like 25,
Yeah.
or some people are even saying 28.
Yeah.
So that teenager still can't really make their own decisions that well. So you kind of need to
You
be
got a guide.
you need to be their guide, but you
Yeah.
kind of take a step back in allowing them a little bit more freedom,
And independence.
and they probably won't even want to be as connected to you anymore because
Yeah.
they've had that biological trigger that says now's my time to go out in the world and be more connected with my peers. But yeah, you obviously still need that guide because now that they are so influenced by their peers and they don't have that prefrontal cortex fully developed to make the good decisions, you'll see teenagers making like insane choices sometimes because you're just like, whoa, like
What was that?
Yeah, where is that coming from? So you still need to be there for them to be like, hey, like I don't think you should do that. I think you should do this. So it's interesting how that transition happens. And I never really fully learned about that until this book. That like no other animal has that phase
yeah,
where
that's
you
interesting.
gradually
Secondary
develop it.
altriciality, they call it.
Oh, okay, that secondary jump where you
The secondary altriciality is where the infant or the humans are so dependent on each other. Like, you know, you don't just like birth your child the way that a horse will birth the foal. They're up on their legs and come see you for a drink once in a while, but they're off on their own pretty much and,
exactly.
and you know, independent. Whereas humans,
they need time.
they need a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. So then that teenage phase is really interesting. And then after that, I do want to move into like the adult phase and how self-regulation, it obviously still applies to everybody, maybe more so the children, but it can apply to your teenagers, your and
It's
then
for everyone.
yeah. Because what I was thinking, even me at work, I don't have kids, but if I'm like managing or guiding people, it's still helpful to know, is this person behaving that way because they're really stressed and overwhelmed, or is it because they're intentionally misbehaving? And I feel like as you go from child to adult,
Yeah.
the likelihood that you're
Becoming the stress detective?
that you're probably more likely to stress detective, but you're also probably more likely that the adult is going to be intentionally misbehaving.
Yeah.
Or you at least put more responsibility on them. Like it's like if adults like, no, I'm
Dude,
really
get a
stressed.
grip.
It's
Like,
like,
you should
well,
know by
you need
now.
to go to bed. Like there's certain responsibilities that an adult has. That's like you need to kind of figure out your own self-regulation.
Yeah.
It's not my issue anymore. But yeah, the adult phase, you still have lingering things from the childhood, and now we can tie in that attachment style stuff that you were talking about earlier, Kailey. Do you know much about the attachment styles, like what the styles are, and like how they come about from childhood?
Yeah. So you have secure attachment, which is the ultimate goal. That's
Right.
what is important between attachment being between, a care person in their life. Doesn't have to be the parent, like you were saying, Jen. And then there can be insecure attachment, anxious attachment,
Right.
ambivalent-
Avoidant, I think.
avoidant attachment.
And fearful, I believe.
Disorganized attachment.
Yeah, I think there might be
Okay.
some synonyms of the.
Some of them are the same.
Yeah,
There's a few
that's it. I
styles.
think because there's ambivalent as well, I believe.
Oh, I
So
see.
basically, and there's overlapping. Like I know for me, when I look at attachment styles,
And for people who have never heard about this,
Right.
I just want to say, like, this attachment style is the style of attachment you're going to have in your relationships, even as an adult. So,
Yeah,
like, let's say you're
right.
dating somebody,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how do you deal with them? Which is
Yeah.
fascinating to know that this comes from childhood when you were super
That should be
young.
like your number one speed dating question is,
Yeah.
tell me your relationship
Yeah.
with your mother.
Yeah, no
Right.
You know?
kidding, no
and
kidding.
if somebody says, "Oh, well, like I'm 40 years old and I still sleep in her bed," you go, okay, well, you gotta
Yeah.
run, like get out of
Yeah,
there, you know.
yeah, exactly.
Or if somebody's, telling me about your mother and it's all expletives, then you gotta run. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
you know? So-
Yeah, I think, and talking about regulation, co-regulation, and attachment. Like I'm a new parent, so I can't. I'm not an expert, but I feel like from what I've read, attachment is just so important. Like it is
Huge.
like the foundation of all of this. Like in order to have the co-regulation, in order to have self-regulation when you're an adult, it starts with attachment. It starts with having a strong attachment with a caregiver in your life. And
And so that's about being responsive, right?
Okay.
Being very responsive and attuned with your
Yeah.
children.
So if
Yeah.
you're not responsive to your child, they'll be more likely to develop a negative attachment style. Like, I'm just
Yeah,
trying
like
to
secure attachment from my training, it only occurs like 60% of the time, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Like, uh, you know, um, I always bring up Gabor Mate, and he has a study, and this is just to tie into like what a secure attachment might look like. He was talking about a study where they looked at mothers and babies, and the mothers that were, there's mothers that like hold their baby and are attuned with the baby's needs and picking them up and kissing and hugging and all that stuff. And then there were the mothers that just like were above and beyond, constantly attuning to their children, always like holding them when they could, and just extra loving and extra physical attention.
Touch.
Yeah, extra physical touch.
So yeah.
And those children, it was a long-term study. Those children showed this high signs of like mood stability and just overall mental
Recovering quickly
Yeah.
from stressors.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So you really, I don't know if this is still, if people still think this, but you really can't spoil a child.
No.
That's a perfect example
So-
of like that's just not something you can do.
The touch
Right, a
is
young child, I
is the
guess.
oxytocin.
Yeah, sorry, in that way.
right?
You can't spoil a child emotionally.
Yeah.
Is what I should clarify.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So touch is where the oxytocin production starts, right?
Right.
And science tells us that oxytocin is the precursor to dopamine. And dopamine is what helps us get the job done. Now, if you're neurodiverse, sometimes you underproduce dopamine and you need the help of a stimulant, but oxytocin is huge. It's huge. And so I think we were talking about this. I had attended a symposium where there was somebody from Montclair State University and speaking about touch and oxytocin and how the newborn against the mother, skin to skin contact, if the mother senses that the child's thermoregulation is low, like they're not producing enough heat, the mother's temperature will raise out of nowhere
Wow.
and do a heat transfer to the infant, and then basically once the infant has reached the right temperature, then that process stops. And that's all probably being done within like the hypothalamus of the brain, right? Like that's the thermostat of the brain responsible for thermoregulation, which thermoregulation is very energy expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think the mother and the child have like a uniquely special connection? Like, or would that type of thing happen with the father? I feel like.
I think it can happen with anybody.
Oh,
Touch
really?
is huge.
I think, maybe not that specific. Like I don't know
Like
if the
the-
not
specific
that
temperature-
example there.
Yeah, but I think for sure.
that's
and
like a newborn we're talking about.
yeah,
you know?
exactly. And it is.
Right.
It is neat that now when a baby is born, immediately the baby, like skin to skin, they put the baby on the mother,
yeah.
so that
That
they
was
can
my
kind
birth
of.
plan when I had Nick. I said,
Oh,
nice. Oh,
I
wow,
said
okay.
I want him on me. Well, I didn't know I was having a boy, but I said I want the baby on me right
Yeah,
away.
It's so
Yeah.
good.
And
Yeah.
and not everybody can nurse. I mean,
Yeah.
nursing was huge for me, and
Right.
and nursing has an impact on
Yeah.
on that attachment,
Definitely.
and oxytocin production,
Yeah,
and so
and
forth. But not everybody can nurse,
Yeah.
and there's other ways.
Yeah. I've read it, or like I've seen it written that like every child needs one person that thinks the sun sets and rises on them.
Yeah.
And that's just like a nice little kind of I don't know, poetic way to say that. Yeah, it just anyone who is consistently there for them and a safe haven, like port in the storm. So when the child is that storm of a tantrum or meltdown
Right.
or whatever, they have someone that is there to calm them. And that's kind of what
Right.
co-regulation is, where it's like, I'm the port in the storm. Like, you come into me and I'm going to be the safe waters. I'm not also going to be the storm. Because how,
Mm-hmm.
and when you get the anxious attachment, or, and this is where, you know, I kind of mix them up a little bit, but the insecure, anxious um, attachment is when the caregiver is the storm and the port, and that's confusing for the child.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, sometimes I'm gonna help you and I'm gonna be the, you know, come into the safe haven,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'm not gonna be, and that confuses kids, and that's when they go, are you safe or are you not? And they might be more hyper aware, or more anxious just
Right.
in their future relationships, things like
Like they're wondering if the parent still like loves them or cares about them a lot of the time, right? Because I
yeah.
could see that if you're an anxious attachment style in your like your adult relationship, you're gonna be questioning, oh, are we still on good terms? Like, are
Yeah,
we still good?
exactly.
Like, does
Yeah,
this
yeah.
person still
Sometimes,
like
like,
me?
you might, if your partner is like giving you the cold shoulder or something, you might suddenly, if you have a tendency to have a more anxious attachment, might go, "Oh my gosh, is the relationship over? Like,
Yeah.
you haven't talked to me all day. Like, I don't know, did I do something wrong? Like, it's probably me. I don't know." And you kind of
Yeah.
have more of that tendency to overthink or be
Right.
curious about. Yeah,
Yeah.
your acceptance, I guess. Will you be
Yeah.
accepted?
Well, just even the word anxious, like it's a lot of like questioning and wondering, like,
Mm-hmm.
are they here for me? Are they not? Who knows? And then the
Yeah.
avoidant, or maybe there's another synonym for that one, but avoidant, my understanding is that develops when maybe somebody wasn't there, or
Neglectful.
yeah, or
Mm-hmm.
it's like your understanding now is that you can be deeply burned by the people that are closest to you, so you now
Mm-hmm.
just avoid connecting to people.
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe your parent was there, but then they disappeared, or like
Yeah.
who knows what happens.
Yeah.
But that,
You might tend to, in a relationships, be the one that is almost like one foot out the door, where you're like very like plan B is always there, that you're not going to like give in, you're not going to be in that vulnerable situation where you're like pouring your heart out to someone, like, this is how I feel about all these things. You're like,
right,
I'm going to stay a few feet back and have my wall up because I don't want to get burned again.
right,
And isn't Plan B like the morning after pill?
Yeah,
No.
that too.
yeah,
That too. So
yeah, a lot of good uses. But what like what if you are like one of the adults listening out there and you're thinking, okay, well, maybe I had a childhood like that, or maybe they just see, I think that is my style in the relationship. Do you guys know if
Mhm.
there's any good ways to try to become secure even when you're an adult? Like it,
Well, with self-reg, we believe that nothing is fixed and that you can change anybody's trajectory at any
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
right,
really, not just for a child.
right, okay. It's just they're maybe perhaps more malleable when they're a child, but the brain is
Yeah.
still constantly
For
changing
sure.
when you're an
Yeah, it doesn't have
adult.
to be all like doom and gloom. First 4 years are, you know, that's, you know, you're hardening the brain and that's it. It's, if the, like, the brain can change and grow, and we are constantly adapting and growing, you
Mm-hmm.
know, for better or worse, and so it can go in the way of better if you're self-aware. And I think really an important place to start is getting to know yourself better.
So
Right.
yeah, we were talking about fasting earlier, and
Yeah.
neurogenesis is a
Right.
thing where you actually start producing brain cells,
Mm.
right?
Right.
After a certain time of
Mm.
restricted eating, you can
Yeah.
reproduce brain cells.
I know that long-term exercise really helps with developing new brain, or
Oh
sorry,
yeah.
long duration exercise. Like
Mm.
if you go for like a 45-minute run, for example, that's really good for
Oh, cool.
the neuroplasticity and development,
Mm.
just from that exercise in the brain episode.
Challenging yourself
Yeah.
continuously.
Yeah, I've heard like intense emotional spikes or something that put your brain into a more plastic state where it can be more malleable. It's like when you're that's often when we learn the best, when the emotions are spiked the most, and that's how
Mm.
people can like it's often those those super stressful moments where you walk away learning the most.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can intentionally increase your focus and emotion, your learning ability will be greater. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and I kind of want to start wrapping it up, but I do want to close it off on like, do you think for anybody out there listening, are there ways that to kind of summarize how you can be a better parent? Maybe perhaps if there's people that are thinking about having kids, they haven't yet, or maybe they just had kids, how they can get prepared and be a better parent.
I say show your viewers that book.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you can get on to selfreg.ca, I believe is the domain name. And there's
Yeah.
lots of individualized types of training, whether it's like for parents or something quick, or if you want to take a deeper dive and go months into it, you can. But it'll
Right.
help you understand as a parent what is physiologically possible at any
Right.
given time, you know? And it
Yeah.
becomes a way of life, really.
Right. Self-regulate way of life for you and your child. Because if you want to be regulating them, you need to be regulating yourself.
Absolutely.
And just for anybody who is just listening and not watching the video right now, I was holding up a book here, and it's called Self-Reg: How to Help Your Child and You Break the Stress Cycle and Successfully Engage with Life. And it's written by Dr. Stuart Shanker. So this was the main research tool that I used to prepare for this podcast. So yeah, check it out. Order it on Amazon or whatever.
Yeah.
Great.
So yeah, that's it. We'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for coming on the
Okay.
podcast.
Thank you so
and
much.
Thank you everybody
Ollie,
for
For
listening.
having us, yes.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.